The whole patio went quiet after her laugh echoed through the speakers. I wasn't supposed to hear it. No one noticed me in the hallway just inside the house, holding her scarf in one hand and a plastic cup in the other, frozen like a ghost. "He makes me feel alive," she giggled, clinking her glass with his. And the worst part wasn't the words, it was the tone. Like she meant it. Like she'd been holding it in for months. Everyone in the group laughed. One woman gasped. Another said, "You're so bad, Laurel." I wanted to walk away. I really did. But my legs didn't move. I was listening like it was someone else's life unraveling, not mine. My wife, Laurel, standing 5 feet away, joking about another man like I didn't even exist. And then she said something that didn't even get a laugh. That's how real it was. I mean, Wesley's sweet, but I don't know. Sometimes it feels like I'm just sleeping next to a houseplant. A few nervous chuckles. Someone cleared their throat. She tried to cover it with a sip from her drink, but the damage was done. I slowly backed away down the hall, scarf still in hand, something sour building in the back of my throat. It was like my stomach knew the truth before my brain could admit it. I had spent the whole day ironing her dress, picking up the cake she ordered, even fixing the porch light so we wouldn't trip coming home. I had driven us to the party thinking this might be a turning point, something good. And now here I was, hiding behind a doorway while she tore me down with a smile. Outside, she looked perfect. Every hair in place. Every move choreographed. Inside, she was turning into someone I didn't recognize, and I was realizing I had no idea when the transformation began. But the night wasn't over. At 11:46 p.m., I saw something that finally cracked whatever was left of my denial. And it happened out in the open, right on the dance floor, under the string lights, as the band started playing some slow cover of an old Fleetwood Mac song. She was dancing with him. Not like a polite sway. Not a group circle. No. Her arms were around his neck, his hand on her lower back, and her head tilted like she wanted to stay there. My throat dried up. I started blinking too fast. I wasn't sure if I was about to cry or collapse. I left before midnight. Didn't even tell her. Just got in the car and drove around for a while until I ended up in a parking lot behind a grocery store, sitting with the engine running and my headlights off. She didn't call. Didn't text. Didn't even ask where I went. She got home at 1:14 a.m. I heard the keys fumble, the door creak, her heels clicking across the hardwood. Then I heard it, her crying in the driveway. Not inside. Not looking for me. Just sitting on the cold concrete like the night had finally sobered her up. She didn't know I was watching through the blinds. She didn't know I had already found the message on her phone earlier that afternoon, the one she forgot to delete. She didn't know that this was only the beginning of the unraveling. And neither did I. By morning, the driveway incident was already burned into my memory. I watched her from the bedroom window until she pulled herself up off the concrete, wiped her eyes, and walked inside like nothing happened. She didn't even glance toward the living room, where she surely knew I was pretending to sleep. When the door clicked shut, I kept my eyes closed and breathed slow and steady, as if I were dreaming through it. Truth is, I hadn't slept at all. She showered. She made coffee. She hummed. Not a word about the night before. And me? I sat there in the same sweatpants I wore to the party, staring at the ring on my finger like it was choking me. I should have confronted her right then. I should have demanded an explanation for what she said, for how she touched him, for what I read on her face when she thought I wasn't looking. But I didn't. Instead, I waited until she left the house to grab a few things from Shelby's and forgot her phone on the nightstand. I didn't touch it right away. I just looked at it, sitting there like a snake coiled in sunlight. I wasn't the kind of man who snooped. Or at least I used to believe I wasn't. But this was different. Something had snapped in me, or maybe something finally woke up. I unlocked it. No password. She'd always trusted me too much. The first thing I saw was a text thread with a contact named G. No last name. No photo. Just the letter, like she thought that would somehow keep it private. I opened it, and everything slowed down. Gee, last night was everything. Gee, you looked stunning in that dress. Gee, wish I could have taken it off myself. Laurel, soon. He suspects nothing. He never does. I read it 3 times, then dropped the phone like it burned me. My ears were ringing. The words blurred together. He suspects nothing. That's what she thought of me. A blind, clueless pet who didn't see her slipping away, one secret at a time. I picked the phone back up and scrolled further. Photos. Just a few, and nothing explicit, but enough to cut deep. Her smiling in the mirror. Her in that same green dress, biting her lip. and one of her holding a glass of wine with a sliver of someone else's arm beside her. Burgundy shirt. It had to be him. I stared at that image for so long, I didn't hear the front door open. Laurel forgot her phone again, huh? A voice said. I froze. It wasn't Laurel. It was Shelby. She stood in the hallway holding Laurel's car keys and a to-go cup, looking confused and a little annoyed. She told me to come grab this, she added, pointing at the phone in my hand. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even try to hide it. Just handed it to her and said, Did you know? Her eyes shifted. Know what? You were at the party. You saw them dancing. You laughed when she said that thing about him making her feel alive. Shelby hesitated. Her face softened. Wesley, it's not what you think. I interrupted, my voice hoarse. Then what is it? She didn't answer. Just looked down at her shoes and said, She never meant for it to go this far. I let out this pathetic, bitter laugh. The kind you give when someone just confirmed the worst thing you were afraid to believe. And then she left, quietly, with Laurel's phone. I didn't follow her. I just stood there in the quiet, realizing the house felt like it belonged to someone else now. Her perfume still hung in the air. The coffee was still warm. But the trust? The reality I'd lived in? All of that had already walked out the door. And I wasn't even sure I wanted it back. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Because later that afternoon, Laurel returned with the brightest smile on her face, and a question that shattered me even further. Can we talk about taking a trip together? Somewhere warm, maybe a beach? I think we need it. I stared at her in silence, wondering how someone could lie that beautifully. And I said yes, because I needed to know how far she'd take it. I told her yes. I said we should take a trip, something warm, something sunny, something that would reset us. And when she hugged me, she held on longer than usual, like she needed me to believe she was trying. Maybe part of her wanted to. But in that moment, all I could think about was the message on her phone. He suspects nothing. And she was right. I had suspected nothing for months, maybe longer. I don't know when it started, and that's what keeps me up most nights. Was it that conference she went to last spring? The long girls' weekend, when she didn't FaceTime once? Or was it always there, like a draft under the door I never noticed until the storm hit? She suggested Florida. Clearwater. Said she wanted ocean air and cocktails by the water. I said sure. I booked the flights. I even upgraded the hotel room. Oceanfront, king bed, early check-in. I told myself this would be my last act of trying. After that, I would stop pretending I didn't see the cliff we were standing on. I just didn't expect her to push first. The morning we flew out, I caught her packing a second swimsuit I'd never seen before. Red, barely there, tag still on. Since when do you wear something like that? I asked. She laughed it off. I just wanted to feel bold, she said. Don't you want me to feel sexy again? I nodded slowly, even smiled, but something about the way she zipped it up fast, like hiding contraband, made my stomach curl. The flight was quiet. She read a book. I stared out the window and kept wondering if G was texting her while she pretended to highlight fiction. At the hotel, she opened the sliding door to the balcony and stood there for a long time, just letting the wind hit her face like she was practicing being someone else. I took a picture of her then. I don't even know why. Just instinct. A frozen frame of a woman who used to be mine, looking out at a horizon that didn't include me anymore. The first 2 nights were strange. We didn't argue, but it felt like we were actors playing roles from an old script neither of us believed in. She kept her phone face down. She excused herself for walks that lasted too long. She wore that red swimsuit to the pool, but barely swam. Just floated, eyes closed, sun on her skin, lips slightly parted like she was waiting to be touched by someone who wasn't me. On the 3rd night, she left for drinks downstairs. Said she needed to clear her head. I waited in the room, scrolling through channels, pretending not to count the minutes. She didn't come back for 2 hours. And when she did, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes glassy, but not from alcohol. She smelled like aftershave that wasn't mine. I didn't ask. I just watched her slide under the covers and turn away from me without a word. I laid awake that whole night listening to the waves and wondering how many times a man can break without making a sound. The next morning, I did something I wasn't proud of, but I needed answers. While she was in the shower, I checked her purse. Not her phone this time. Her purse. And there it was, crumpled up between her makeup bag and travel toothbrush, a room key. But not for our floor. Room 507. We were in 914. I just stood there, staring at it. like it might dissolve in my hand if I looked hard enough. I didn't need to guess. I knew. That's where G was. That's who she was seeing while I was upstairs Googling romantic restaurants and trying to find the words to ask if she still loved me. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I pocketed the key, walked down to the hotel cafe, and ordered the blandest breakfast I could find, dry toast and cold eggs, because my appetite had gone wherever her honesty had disappeared. That afternoon, she suggested we rent bikes. Ride along the beach. Smile for strangers and post selfies with sunsets and hashtags like #healing and #justice. I played along. I even held her hand for a while, wondering how long she could keep up the charade before it shattered. And that night, I used the key. I stood outside room 507 just past midnight, listening through the door. I heard her laugh, but it wasn't just her voice. A man's voice followed. I didn't go in. I didn't knock. I just stood there, weak, invisible, unraveling. Then I slid the key under the door. Not a note. Not a sound. Just that plastic card, a message they'd both understand. And then I walked back to our room, packed my bag, and sat in the dark. She didn't come back until morning. Her hands were shaking when she reached for me, but I didn't move. I had nothing left to give. She sat across from me on the edge of the hotel bed, fingers clenched in her lap like she was practicing a confession. Her lips moved a few times, starting and stopping sentences before they even made it into the air. I just stared at the suitcase by the door, mine, already zipped. I had packed everything except the shirt I was wearing, like I wasn't even part of the same conversation anymore. Not that there really was one. "Wes," she finally whispered. "Can we talk before we go home?" I nodded, but not because I wanted to talk. I just wanted to see what version of the truth she was willing to sell me. She said she'd been confused, that things had felt off between us for a while, that maybe the trip was too little too late. He was just someone who reminded me what excitement felt like, she said. I never meant for it to mean anything. It was strange, hearing her say he without a name, like he was just a plot device in a story she had rewritten on the fly. I didn't ask her why she didn't come back to the room that night. I didn't ask what they talked about in 507 or what she did with her wedding ring while she was there. I just nodded again, like someone watching the end of a film they already knew the twist to. We flew home in silence. At baggage claim, she grabbed my hand, probably for show, and I didn't pull away. It felt almost funny. How do people could return from a tropical getaway looking like they'd just buried someone? I guess, in a way, we had. Back home, the routine crept in fast. She started cooking again. Left sticky notes with cute doodles on the fridge. Tried kissing me at night before bed. All these desperate, stitched-up signals that screamed, "Please pretend nothing happened." But the distance between us was a canyon. I couldn't sleep without hearing the laugh behind that hotel door. I couldn't drink coffee without wondering if she still texted him between sips. And yet, I said nothing, because I was afraid of knowing the whole truth. Afraid of how deep the rot went. And then I got the call. It was a Tuesday morning. I was driving to the hardware store to replace a busted shelf in the laundry room, something mundane to keep my hands busy. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally I'd ignore it, but something compelled me to answer. "Wesley." The voice was male. Low. Hesitant. But familiar in a way I couldn't place. This is Grant. I know you don't know me, but we've met. Kind of. Silence. And then, I'm the one from Clearwater. Room 507. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. He kept talking before I could say anything. "She didn't tell me you were on that trip. Not until the third night. I thought you were separated. She said she was sorting things out with her husband." I didn't speak. He went on. "I found the key under the door and knew instantly who left it. Look, I'm not proud of any of it, but I didn't want to be part of someone's betrayal. That's not who I am. Funny how people who aren't that kind of person always seem to become that kind of person anyway. I'm calling because she came to see me yesterday," he added. "After you got back. Said she couldn't do this anymore. That she was going to tell you everything. But I figured maybe you should hear it from me, in case she didn't." I finally spoke. "What exactly is everything?" A pause. "I think you already know," he said softly. "But if you need the ugly version, she told me she hadn't felt connected to you for over a year. That the only reason she didn't leave was because she didn't want to hurt you. Said she owed you comfort. Stability. But not love." That last sentence hit harder than I expected. She owed me comfort. Like I was a tired old dog she didn't want to put down. He ended the call by apologizing again. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say anything. I just sat in the parking lot, staring at a cart corral, blinking like I was waking up from anesthesia. I drove home with the window down, hoping the wind would clear my head. It didn't. She was waiting in the kitchen when I got back, stirring soup like we were still in some shared domestic dream. And I realized right then that she hadn't told me because she wasn't planning to. That her visit to him was a goodbye, not to end the affair, but to erase the trail, to bury the past and come back home like nothing ever happened. But now I had something she didn't expect. The voice of the man she betrayed me with. And I hadn't decided yet how I was going to use it. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I cooked dinner. Nothing fancy, just roasted chicken with lemon and rosemary, and that pasta she used to like with sun-dried tomatoes. I even lit candles. Not because I was trying to win her back. No, I was setting the stage. I wanted her to feel safe, comfortable, loved. I wanted to remind her what the illusion looked like before I broke it apart. She came down the stairs wearing her softest sweater, the one she always wore when she wanted to be cuddled. Her hair still damp from a long shower. She smiled when she saw the table, a gentle, practiced smile. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. "I know," I replied. "I wanted to." We ate quietly for a while, like nothing was wrong, like we were just another couple winding down after a long day. I even asked her about work, and she answered like she believed the rhythm of us still existed. She didn't notice that I hadn't touched my wine. She didn't notice that I was watching her like I was memorizing a stranger. When we were done, I cleared the plates and poured her another glass. Then I sat back down and said it, not cruelly, not loudly, just softly, like it was a fact. "I spoke to Grant today." She froze, mid-sip, her glass hovering an inch from her lips. Then it clinked back down onto the coaster. She blinked. "Grant who?" I tilted my head, amused at the effort. "Room 507, Grant." The color drained from her face like someone had flipped a switch. Her shoulders sagged, and she looked down at her lap. She didn't deny it. Didn't ask how I found out. That part was over. What shocked me was what she said next. "So, what did he tell you?" There was no panic. No apology. Just that flat, tired tone. Like someone admitting to forgetting the trash again, not wrecking a marriage. I told her everything. His version. Her words. The comfort, but not love line. She didn't even flinch. "I guess that's fair," she said. "I didn't expect him to call you." I leaned forward, my voice still steady. "You weren't planning to tell me at all, were you?" She shook her head slowly. "I thought I could come back and rebuild it. I thought if I let it go, we could, maybe find our way back." "To what?" She looked at me then. Really looked. And what I saw wasn't guilt. It wasn't sorrow. It was something far worse, a mix of resignation and contempt. Like she pitted me. "To something close enough," she said. "Something that works. People do it all the time." My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. "You mean settle for something you don't want and pretend you didn't light it on fire?" She stood up, clearly done with the conversation. But I wasn't finished. "There's one more thing," I said. "Something I didn't tell you." She paused, turned. I recorded the call. Her eyes flickered. "Why would you?" "Because I knew you'd lie to my face. And I wanted to make sure, for once, the truth lives somewhere outside your version of it." She stepped toward me, trembling now. "Delete it." "I haven't decided," I said. "But if you're going to keep playing house, pretending this never happened, I want you to know that every time you try to rewrite the story, I have the original." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. And I think that's what scared her most, the fact that I was calm. Too calm. She went upstairs without another word. The sound of her footsteps on the hardwood floor felt heavier than usual. I sat in that chair for another hour, listening to the silence. And in that silence, I realized something I hadn't been ready to admit before. She wasn't just sorry because I found out. She was angry. Angry that she didn't get to end things on her terms. Angry that the weak, boring, houseplant husband finally stopped looking the other way. But what she didn't know, not yet, was that the recording wasn't the only thing I had. And the next person who would hear it wasn't going to be her. It wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that. At least, I didn't think of it as revenge. It felt more like preservation. Like if I didn't act, if I didn't do something, I was going to dissolve into a version of myself that I wouldn't even recognize. I'd already spent months walking around as a ghost, invisible in my own home, half listened to, half touched, half loved. I couldn't go back to that. Not now. Not after everything I'd seen and heard. So, I made a decision that felt foreign to me. A step I wouldn't have taken even a month ago. But the man I used to be, the one who sorted her mail and kept the car tank full and folded the towels just the way she liked, that guy had finally run out of breath. It happened on a Wednesday. Rainy. The kind of day where everything feels like it's holding its breath. Laurel was upstairs in the shower. I was downstairs at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop screen, the cursor blinking over the contact form on a website I never imagined myself visiting. It belonged to Charles Ellison, Laurel's boss. CEO of a mid-sized marketing agency, family man, older, respected, and by all accounts a decent human being. I knew for a fact she admired him, talked about him often, told me he was her mentor. I even met him once at a company dinner. He asked if I was the tech guy, and Laurel laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. I didn't send the audio file directly. I wrote a message first. Simple, polite, calm. I said, "Mr. Ellison, I'm reaching out with something I believe you have a right to hear. This is not a threat. This is not blackmail. It's just the truth, and I believe you value truth. Attached is a recording involving 2 of your employees. I leave it to your discretion. W." And I attached it. The conversation between me and Grant. The part where he admits the affair. The part where he repeats Laurel's words about how she didn't love me anymore but stayed out of guilt. I didn't include her name. I didn't have to. He'd recognize her voice instantly. Then I pressed send. And just like that, I felt the strangest thing, not satisfaction, not triumph, just silence. An internal kind of stillness, like the storm had passed and left only debris behind. Laurel came downstairs 20 minutes later, towel around her shoulders, humming something off-key. She didn't notice the laptop, didn't ask why my hands were shaking. She just asked if we had milk. I told her no, and she offered to go get some. Might stop by the office real quick, she added. Just for a second. Of course she would. It was always just a second. 3 hours passed. Then 4. When she finally walked through the door, her hair was windblown and her eyes were red. She looked at me, opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her hands were empty. No milk. What happened? I asked, voice low. She sat down like gravity had turned against her. Then, after a long pause, she said, "Charles called me into his office. Said there'd been an anonymous tip. He didn't play the recording, but he said he'd heard enough to be very disappointed. Said I could take the rest of the week to think about things." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. But she didn't. She just stared at the floor, twisting the ring around her finger like she was trying to erase it. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. Not because of the words, but because of how defeated she sounded when she said them. "I think I just lost everything." And for the first time in months, I looked at her and felt nothing. Not rage. Not sorrow. Not vindication. Just emptiness. Because what she lost wasn't something I took from her. She handed it away. In a hotel room. In a text thread. In every eye roll and excuse and silence between us. "You didn't lose it," I told her. "You gave it away." She covered her face with both hands, breathing heavy, but I didn't move toward her. I didn't comfort her. That part of me, the man who absorbed her pain just to avoid confrontation, had finally disappeared. And then, she said the line I'll never forget. Not because it was dramatic or cruel, but because of how broken it sounded coming from her lips. "I don't know who I am anymore." I almost said, "Neither do I." But I didn't. Because deep down, I didn't know who she was now. I just didn't like the answer. It would have been easier if it ended there, with her job slipping away, with her broken voice in the kitchen, with that fragile admission of not knowing who she was anymore. There was a strange temptation to let that be enough, to close the book on her mistakes and file everything away under damaged but human. But something didn't let me. Maybe it was intuition. Or maybe I finally stopped trusting silence. Whatever it was, it drove me into the back of our hallway closet that night, long after she'd fallen asleep upstairs, curled up on the far edge of our bed like a guest too ashamed to ask for an extra blanket. I had no idea what I was looking for. My hands moved through coats and old shoeboxes on instinct. Not in rage. Not like someone tearing through drawers looking for lipstick on a collar. No, it was calm. Controlled. Like I was checking the pulse of the house itself. Then I found it. A small wooden box with a brass latch I'd never noticed before. It was buried beneath winter scarves and an old yoga mat. I sat down on the floor with it in my lap, legs crossed like a kid opening a time capsule. It didn't feel heavy, but I already knew something inside it would change everything. I opened the lid. Inside were letters. Not many. Just 4. Each one sealed and dated. The earliest was from about 10 months ago. The latest 2 weeks before the party. Each envelope had the same name scribbled across the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. Ethan. I froze. We don't know any Ethans. Not close ones. Not family. Not coworkers. I opened the most recent one. My hands weren't trembling, not yet, but my mouth went dry the second I unfolded the paper. Ethan. He still has no idea. We spent 5 days in Clearwater, and I came home with his sunburn and his guilt. I don't know how I keep doing this. I told myself you were a mistake. But if that's true, why do I keep writing? I dreamed about you last night again. The one where we live in that tiny white house near the dunes and no one knows us. It's always peaceful in that dream. No Wesley. No guilt. Just your voice and the sound of the sea. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't Grant. This wasn't the man from the hotel. This was someone else. Another man. Older. Longer. Deeper. A shadow behind the shadow. I read the other letters, one by one, and each peeled back more of the illusion. She hadn't just betrayed me with a fling. She hadn't just crumbled under emotional distance and sought attention. No, she had loved someone else. Quietly. Intentionally. While sitting across from me at dinner. While celebrating our anniversary. While I held her through migraines and bought her throat lozenges and played her favorite records on Sundays. There was one line that gutted me more than anything Grant ever said. If I could rewind 10 years and choose differently, I would have married you instead. I sat on the floor for what felt like hours. The letters scattered around me, and I realized something I hadn't fully grasped until now. She had built a parallel life, one where I was a placeholder, a default, a detour she'd always meant to turn away from. All those nights I thought she was detached, it wasn't numbness. It was comparison. She wasn't empty. She was elsewhere. And suddenly, everything made sense. The way she stared at the ocean. The way she flinched when I touched her shoulder in bed. The way she smiled after long silences, not the kind of smile you give someone, but the kind you give yourself when you're thinking about someone far away. When I finally stood up, my knees stiff and my chest hollow, I didn't know what I was going to do next. I didn't rage. I didn't shout. I just gathered the letters, placed them neatly back in the box, and put it on the dining room table. The next morning, when she came down for coffee, she stopped cold. She saw the box. She saw the letters stacked in a row. And she saw me, standing in the doorway, holding my car keys, wearing a jacket I hadn't touched in months. You found them, she whispered. I found him, I corrected. She sat down slowly, like the floor might give out beneath her. There were no excuses this time. No tears. No stammering half-truths. Only silence. And for the first time since this began, I didn't fill the silence for her. I let it stretch, heavy and real. Because it was hers now. I didn't say much that morning. She tried, for a moment, to speak, but the words caught in her throat like she knew nothing she said could repair what had been found. That's the thing with handwritten confessions. You can't deny them. They don't sound like drunken mistakes or emotional confusion. They sound like decisions. Choices made on purpose in silence when no one was watching. And what those letters said was louder than any scream could have been. I didn't need to argue. Didn't need to ask why she wrote to a man she hadn't seen in years, or whether she still kept in touch with him. The letters were recent enough to answer that for me. All I said, the only thing I could say, was, I think it's time we stop pretending we're trying. She looked up then, eyes glassy, voice trembling. Wesley, I didn't mean for any of this. I thought I was doing the kind thing by staying. I nodded, quietly. You stayed like a stranger renting a room. That's not kindness. That's cowardice. I expected her to protest, to reach for some thread of pity, but she didn't. She just sat there, shoulders curled forward, as if she'd shrunk beneath the weight of everything she'd hidden. And in that moment, I saw the truth that made all the difference. She wasn't the woman I'd fallen in love with anymore. And I wasn't the man who needed her approval to matter. I packed that afternoon. No drama. No ultimatums. I told her she could keep the house. It felt like hers anyway. I didn't want the bed where she dreamed of another man, or the couch where she texted him between my sentences, or the kitchen where she smiled at me with teeth clenched around regret. I took my books, my tools, and the old radio I restored by hand, the one that still played love songs with a little static, like the music was too honest to come in clearly. I moved into a small place outside the city. Just a one-bedroom. Quiet. Unfurnished. I bought a coffee maker and a second-hand sofa, and hung my coat on the doorknob for the first 2 weeks because I hadn't even unpacked yet. But it was mine. Not ours. Not shared. Not haunted. And then something happened that I never expected. Peace. Not happiness. Not at first. That came later. But peace, like a blank page. I slept deeper than I had in years. I started cooking for one and didn't feel lonely. I called an old friend I hadn't spoken to in ages, and we got drinks and laughed like the clock had paused for us. I started going to the same diner every Saturday morning and reading a paperback at the counter, where the waitress eventually stopped asking what I wanted because she already knew. One day, a woman sat next to me, mid-30s, dark curls, an oversized cardigan, and a laugh that didn't sound rehearsed. We talked about the book in my hands. She said she hated the ending. I said I hadn't reached it yet. She smiled and said, I won't spoil it, but I think you'll like how it turns out. I didn't ask for her number that day, but I saw her again. Same diner, same seat, different book. Life moved on, not in a grand, cinematic way. No sweeping declarations or dramatic gestures. Just quietly, kindly, like life was waiting for me to finally show up for it. As for Laurel, she didn't reach out much after the papers were signed. One message. Just one. I hope you find something real, Wes. I never deserved the version of you I threw away. And strangely, I believed her. Not the regret part. I don't think she even understood what she lost. But the truth in her final words. I had always been real. I had always loved with both hands. I just gave it to someone who wasn't ready to hold it. So if you're reading this, if you're where I was, thinking you're too soft, too forgiving, too blind, let me say this clearly. Kindness isn't weakness. Loyalty isn't foolishness. And choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. And sometimes, survival is the first step toward joy. That's what I found, sitting in a secondhand chair, sipping diner coffee, smiling at the quiet. It took heartbreak to get there. But I got there. And now, for the first time in years, I feel alive.